Well, pretty much all of them offered some kind of tax plan last night. Ben Carson wants a tip system where everyone pays 10%, and Rand Paul wants absolutely no exceptions except the home mortgage credit. Josh, did you hear any tax plan that's feasible and wouldn't bankrupt the country within, let's say, a year?
No. In fact, that was the sort of the funny thing about the way that the moderators asked those questions. Like, it was good that it was such a cordial room, because when they got to the tax questions, every question was basically, senator, governor, candidate, how is your tax plan going to work without breaking the budget? I mean, that's basically what all of the questions were. And, again, in some of them, some of the answers that were given, the plant talk of taxes in the undercard debate was remarkably specific. I was really impressed with I didn't even think those guys would have studied that for that. But it seems like that the tax plans are, when you get to folks like Carly Fiorina, Trump, if you try to get into the specifics of it, not only does it not work, it seems like they don't even understand their plan. A week or two ago, where Ben Carson was trying to explain his plan on television, and the anchor tried so hard to help him through it, but he didn't know what he was talking about.
Eric, is there any one candidate that stood out as particularly competent on this issue in the big boy debate?
Not really, because
you don't think that to limit the tax system to 3 pages is the right way to go?
It's the best way. I mean, taxes should just go away and everybody can just pay for everything themselves. But, in reality, I find when the Republicans try to address taxation, they always try to oversimplify it based on traditional conservatism, which is, limited government, let everything kind of run itself. And that doesn't work. You can't simplify the tax code to 3 pages. That would never function. It's too complex. There's too many services that require funding. And you can't approach taxation in such a simple outlook. It won't work.
Oh, Peter, last night was supposed to be a policy debate. We're getting in the weeds, and yet every plan seemed like a far-fetched fantasy, and not only that, but regressive and completely moving away from what the rest of the Western world has done. Isn't this just fantasyland the Republican Party's living in?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned the rest of the Western world, because one of the things that's striking in these debates, and in fact much of the larger political debate that comes out of Washington, is this pretending that every country in the world, in the developed world, is somehow as messed up as we are. And it doesn't acknowledge that most of the developed world has figured out ways to provide reasonable health care for most, if not all, of its citizens, that most of the world has figured out how to have a realistic defense that fits within their financial means, that most of the rest of the world provides higher education without bankrupting families or making students essentially slaves to their loan providers. We're we love to talk about American exceptionalism, and in that sense, we're sadly quite exceptional. The rebut, of course, would be, oh my God, well, Finland, which of course came up last night because John Kasich is ready to defend the Finns.
He will.
Finland has had, and he will personally. I'd like to see him go to Finland as soon as possible. I mean, just parenthetically, Finland has had one of the most cozy relations with the Russians as any state has. I mean, the Russians really didn't invade them in World War II. They certainly didn't invade them during the Cold War. The Finns and the Russians, they're just fine. I'm sure the Finns would be screaming last night in unison, "Don't come here. Stay home, Americans." But going back to this idea that, well, Japan and the UK and Canada and all these other people can provide health care, but, gosh, their taxes are so high. That's not necessarily true when you start to look at the bigger picture. I mean, here in the United States, we pay income taxes, we pay state income taxes, we pay national income taxes, we pay in many cases city income taxes, we pay all sorts of sin taxes on the booze that we need to get through this terrible situation. We pay sales taxes, we pay value-added taxes that are called something else. Usually there's often special restaurant taxes, hotel tax, it just piles on and on and on. And we still pay crazy amounts of money for our health care, and we pay crazy amounts of money for our higher education. So when you sum it all up, I think arguably we're not getting a particularly good deal compared to the rest of the world. But our candidates look at these things in the United States and say, we just don't know how we can fix these things. I think if Eric could arrange for some people in Canada to maybe come down here and explain this to us, it would be a real neighborly thing to do.
Well, we have the sexy prime minister now, right? So we're doing good.
Yeah, he is handsome. He's dreamy. He's very dreamy.